All right. Hey, you guys. My name is Kelsey Kernstein. You are watching Courting the Truth. I am joined today with a top criminal defense attorney, and we are talking, of course, about the Sean Diddy Combs case. Everybody is watching this right now. For those of you that don't know me, just a little reminder update about me. I used to work with Ileana at News Nation. I'm very familiar with Joel's work at Fox News, and I'm super excited to be doing a podcast for them to kind of just break down the case at hand, because I'm going to get to Matthew in just a second here to kind of break down this case and all the questions that we have, because Kid Cudi is taking the stand right now. So we're going to talk all about that. But first, let's break down this case. We know Sean Diddy Combs, he's standing trial in Manhattan right now. And he right now is facing federal sex trafficking charges, racketeering, transportation for prostitution. And these are all really allegations that are stemming from decades of abuse and coercion. He faces life in prison. We're going to talk about that. And the prosecutors are really claiming that he orchestrated a drug-fueled freak-off sex parties for years, for decades, using his empire to manipulate and exploit women. We have seen multiple people taking the stand, including Cassie Ventura, 4 days of testimony. We've seen her mother take the stand, also Don Richards. She was on Danity Kane, a member of Danity Kane. We've also seen a former assistant, George Kaplan, and somebody called the Punisher. But we're going to get to all that, because right now taking the stand is Kid Cudi. He's been testifying, a rapper that is alleging he was dating Cassie for years, and Sean Diddy Combs sounds like he was very threatened and jealous, allegedly threatened and jealous by it, and that he threatened to blow up Kid Cudi's car, in which case Kid Cudi is saying on the stand that in fact did happen. But from my understanding, there is no proof. Basically, let's talk about what happened that day. I'm getting that this happened in January of 2012. And he is saying specifically that the top of my Porsche, this is from Kid Cudi, was cut open, and that's where they inserted a Molotov cocktail. He's claiming that this was all done by Sean Combs. He also called police to report this arson. And when law enforcement came, they found the bottle in the driver's seat. We're going to break down all of this. But first, I want to get to Matthew to kind of talk about how significant is this Kid Cudi testimony. And with these allegations that Combs threatened that he was going to do this, and then this allegedly did happen, but it sounds like there's really no proof that it was Sean Combs. What are your thoughts about all of this?
Well, I think the most significant testimony was Cassie's, and that was essentially their first witness. I think it was their second witness, but she's obviously the star witness here. And all the witnesses that are coming after her are essentially verifying or bolstering her testimony. From what I see, and unfortunately in this case, we don't have cameras in there, so we can't see this firsthand, but all the accounts that I've read is that she's doing a great job, and that the jury liked her. Her testimony was very credible. The way she testified was credible. And on top of that, you have to remember, she's testifying, she's over 8 months pregnant, right? Mm-hmm. So when defense attorneys try to cross-examine her, they can't quite be as aggressive, for lack of a better term, in cross-examining her. So from what I have read, I think that her testimony went very, very well for the prosecution. Now, other people have testified after her. You said there was a male escort. You mentioned Don Richard, or Richard, however she's pronouncing it, and now Kid Cudi. I think these are all things that go to Cassie's testimony, saying that, hey, she's telling the truth. All these things that she's talking about regarding the criminal enterprise, the arson, the beating, the domestic violence, the drugs, all of this is, here's another person who could verify it. Now, it wasn't charged at the time. Maybe there's no proof, but really this is circumstantial. Okay, so I don't know if there's direct proof that he did this, because, Sean Combs didn't go into the vehicle himself, but this is proof of a larger organization. It's circumstantial evidence that he had people do this. He made a direct threat, and that threat, coincidentally, is the theory here. It happened, right? But obviously there's no coincidence here. It was part of a larger organization, a criminal enterprise, which goes to the racketeering charge.
So you're saying what's really important here is that the prosecution that this is corroborating Cassie's story.
Right. I think Cassie's testimony went the best so far, from what I understand. There were some inconsistencies with Dawn's testimony, some minor inconsistencies. Even Cassie's testimony wasn't perfect. She talked about the money. She talked about voluntarily consenting to these freakoffs and some of the other things that she was doing, the drugs and whatnot, because she wanted to be close to Sean Combs. She wanted to, be around him, and her career was at stake, and so on and so forth. But these other people, again, I don't think testified as well as she did. But again, with Kid Cudi and the rest of it, first of all, there's some star power with Kid Cudi, right? So that's an interesting dynamic here. That's what makes this whole trial so interesting, so salacious. You have sex, you have drugs, you have celebrity, you have money, you have power, you have abuse. It's an interesting trial for people to kind of keep track of, that they want to watch this. But Kid Cudi is going to say, she was abused, I was dating her, I knew some of this stuff, he was jealous. So he's going to verify his temper, the domestic violence and the domestic batteries. And then again, a crime was committed on him. Now, could he link that crime to Sean Combs? Maybe he didn't at the time. Well, with everything else that's coming out now, it's circumstantially linked to him. And again, it goes to the elements of that racketeering charge.
But I find it interesting because the defense is really arguing that this was all consensual, that these were adults, and that this was all motivated by financial gains. What do you say to that?
That is a great defense, but it's probably their only defense. You're absolutely right. When you are saying that the sexual acts were consensual, then that discredits any allegations that it was coerced, or that she was being forced or threatened or bribed, or there was something that they were holding over her. And the funny thing is that in the beginning, when they cross-examined her, they showed her text messages. And the text messages were pretty clear, saying, hey Puff, when's our next freak off? I can't wait to do it. I love doing freak offs with you, things like that, which goes to the fact that it was consensual. Now she says that yes, it was at the time, and yes, I loved him, and that's why I did it. But later on, as things progressed, it definitely was not consensual. It was coerced. You were holding it over my head. It also had to do with my career, so on and so forth. So the consent argument has to be there, because it's really their only argument in this case.
And I think it's interesting when you point that out, because even when her mother took the stand, she said she had to take out like a $20,000 home equity loan because Puff said that these were, I'm going to look it up in my notes.
Yeah.
Yes, expenses.
Yes, he said that. So it was during a rough patch when she was dating, ironically, Kid Cudi, and she went back home for Christmas, and he was upset at her, and he went into this jealous, toxic kind of rage, and he demanded $20,000. This is a billionaire.
Yeah,
demanding
$20,000 is peanuts to him.
Peanuts to him, exactly. Demanding $20,000 from her parents for expenses that he has paid for her while dating. And to their credit, they paid it. They paid it right away.
What's crazy to me is that it also sounds like, from her mother's testimony, is that she was taking pictures of the abuse from him. Like the bruises. I'm shocked that he even went this route, but of course he must have thought he had all the power in the world.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he was brazen. I mean, you look at that video that was in the hotel elevator hallway over there, and you could tell that this guy is a different type of individual. He thinks he is above the law. And usually when people think they're above the law, eventually the law catches up with them, right? And that's what's happening here. But of course, he's very shameless in his conduct and in the control and the power that he thought he had over not only obviously his legal empire, the entertainment empire, but everybody else that was a derivative of that.
Now I want to go ahead and show this video of, his name is The Punisher. I believe he goes by Sheree. I'm going to find it, you guys.
Yeah, The Punisher stands out. I remember that as well.
The Punisher. I have a little interview that he did. So let me show this little interview and then let's go over it, because I think right? We're going to talk about this whole argument from the defense about consensual. So let's watch this video together.
Subtle. Mr. Combs was always basically across the room, and it would be in a low tone, and it would just be suggestive. It was nothing aggressive, nothing that would create some sort of scenario that this was like unnatural between them. Obviously, a sexual scenario with a couple is not the norm, but it's something that I had heard about before. And there's some couples that get into this, and in hindsight, if there were no accusations, I would have saw it as completely natural.
Can you repeat that? You would have seen it as what?
If there was no accusations, like in hindsight, all this stuff is in hindsight. Like in the moment, I didn't see it as anything but a couple doing something risque, and Cassie as a partner trying to create a fantasy for who I believed was her husband, and for the majority of this.
So at one point in your testimony, I think you mentioned, and I was just reading transcript because, of course, there's no cameras. You mentioned that Sean Combs was slightly aggressive in his tone, and that Cassie would sigh or wince at some of his direction. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I understand that you're getting it in parts. It was quite a long testimony. When the sighing and the wincing was associated with, some of the direction was very specific, and it could be one after the other in terms of move the candle to the left, move it a little more, move it a little more, and now move your body a little more, stuff like that. And it was kind of unnatural for a scenario where you're trying to create a sexual situation. So my understanding or my interpretation of it in the moment was frustration with the repeated directions.
You know, I do find it interesting. I think that, I just want to show another picture. This was going on for years, but you have this Shay Hayes, that is his name. He's saying that this was consensual. I was hired around 12 times. I think it's 8 or 12, the actual number. And, you know, Sean Diddy Combs was telling us, you know, how to move, how to be, where to be. I mean, I guess, doesn't the defense here have a stronger argument when it comes to this? I mean, I felt like the Punisher's testimony almost was a little bit, parts of it, in favor of Sean Combs.
Well, to some degree, because what they brought out in cross-examination was that they asked him, well, did you get any indication that Cassie didn't want to do this? And he said, no. Basically, he said the exact opposite. Like, I had no indication. She looked like she was enjoying herself in what we were doing sexually, right? Which does help the defense. But what this is saying is they're establishing that Cassie, in fact, did these sexual freak-offs, or these, you know, engaged in sex with these prostitutes that P. Diddy hired, and that he not only hired them, he orchestrated the whole thing. He said it, the lighting, the movement, all the things that he wanted. It was almost like a director, and that director was staging a scene, right, for a movie, but it was a pornographic movie is what he was doing. So I think what his testimony was meant to do by the prosecutors is to show that, hey, see, Cassie's telling the truth. She did have sex with these escorts. Here are the escorts. She paid them. He paid them. Here they are. And she didn't want to do this, right? But on cross-examination, again, they're trying to say that, again, this was consensual. She not only, you know, was consented this, she wanted this. She enjoyed it. There was no indication that it was coerced or a bribe. Here are these text messages, and here's this witness that we just cross-examined, and she enjoyed every minute of it.
And what's also interesting is I have so many people that have been watching these little clips that I've been doing on this case, and there are people saying this is domestic violence. Of course, there's a lot of blackmail, you know, attached to this, right? I mean, it's very, very clear that allegedly, if she, you know, he was trying to get $20,000 from her parents, you know, for the cost or the losses that happened to him because of her dating Kid Cudi. I guess, what are your thoughts on people saying that's what's so interesting to me, is that there are a lot of people out there that think that Sean Diddy Combs has a viable argument that he's not guilty in this.
So you brought up a couple things. Domestic violence or domestic battery, a felony or misdemeanor level, is not anywhere associated with the charges in this case. I know it's in the trial as far as testimony, as far as video evidence, and so on and so forth. There's been a ton of testimony that he's beat her. I mean, they showed that video again in the hotel elevator hallway, or the hallway by the elevator, and of course it's clear that the guy is a domestic batterer. One of the first things his team said on opening statements is that, hey, He's a bad guy. He has a bad temper. He's even a domestic batterer. But that's not a part of this case. Okay, committing domestic battery is not a charge here. We have racketeering and we have the other sex charges, the trafficking and the prostitution charges. But being a domestic batterer is not a part of this case. Now, what they're trying to say is, and this is more, they can't say this directly, but this is kind of what they're doing if you're reading between the lines. They're saying this guy is a domestic batterer. The prosecution's saying that. It's so bad. Look at this video. Look at all the evidence. Look at all the witnesses that are testifying to this. So this is a part of who he is. And he also, by the way, has a lot of drugs. And because we went to his homes and we raided his homes, and look at all the drugs we found. Oh, and by the way, look at all the stacks of cash. And next to the cash were sex toys. And it goes on to build, again, the racketeering charge, which shows a criminal operation to engage in all the things he was engaging in, to cover it up, right? That it wasn't just him. He wasn't acting in a solo capacity. This was people on his payroll to further the criminal enterprise that is Sean Puff Diddy Combs.
But you have the Punisher saying, Sheree Hayes saying that it sounds like he signed up for this and likely was paid a large amount of money.
That the Punisher was signed up for it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So he's saying I got paid for this. That helps the prosecution. You got paid to do something illegal, right? Well, the illegality of it is that she didn't want to do this. So you're engaging in prostitution, number one, which is, again, illegal, right? You can't pay somebody for sex. That's transactional. And number two, you're also doing it against her will, right? And Sean Combs is orchestrating all this, which is, again, a part of this criminal enterprise. To me, the criminal enterprise part of it is the one that they really need to attack. And as a defense attorney, I would really try to attack that because obviously that is the most serious offense. It's a life imprisonment penalty. And you really have to say that he's acting in his sole capacity. There is no criminal enterprise. There is nobody else helping him. He may be a bad guy and in a toxic relationship, but this is all his own doing. I think that's the only way to defeat the racketeering charge that he's facing.
Interesting. What, how do you think the jury's going to go here? Right. I read that it's 8 men, 4 women. Does that affect the outcome, the different genders that are watching this play out?
That's a great question. And it's so hard. My favorite thing about the criminal justice system is the jury process, because we really don't know what a jury is going to do. When they get back in that room to deliberate, it's really a special thing, because 12 people who don't know each other, different backgrounds, are going to have to come together and figure this out. I don't think gender necessarily is indicative of how somebody is going to decide in this case. For example, I don't think men are going to side with Sean Combs and women are going to side with Cassie, so to speak, or side with the government. In fact, I think sometimes, in my experience, women are harder on women than men are in a jury setting, right? Women tend to be harder on women, right? So it's very interesting to me. The answer is I don't know what a jury is going to do, but I do know this. There's a lot more testimony to come. The trial is going to be at least a month, most likely, probably a little bit more. It's very hard to say what's going to happen because the defense has not even had a chance to provide their own witnesses yet, to show the jury their side of the story. This is all still in the government's case. Their case in chief is what we call it.
Interesting. I also find, I was reporting a lot on this trial that was going to take place, and reporting a ton about it in the fall. And that's when, Tony Busby said that, oh, well, I have all these civil suits against him, and some of these are underagers. To me, that's what I want to see. I want to see the people take the stand that were at the time underage, allegedly interacting with this all going down, right? Wouldn't that be the most strong argument for the prosecution?
Well, there's nothing saying anything's underage as far as the criminal charges are concerned. A civil suit is a civil suit, and that's separate. Now, some of it overlaps, right? Some of what Cassie alleged in the civil suit, which settled, by the way, within 24 hours, and she got a $20 million settlement from Sean Combs, some of that is going to come into the criminal case and already has. But I haven't seen anything regarding minors or anything like that up to this point.
Interesting. Okay. Well, if Tony Busby is saying, right, and we don't know, and there's a slew of civil suits, but I just don't know why these particular people that are filing these civil suits wouldn't try to take the stand in this federal the federal charges that are against him in New York?
Well, I'll tell you why. So the burden of proof in a civil case is a lot lower than it is in a criminal case. And the prosecutors are going to evaluate each witness to see which witnesses would help prove the elements of each charge in this criminal case. And it's easier to settle, I should say, or to get a finding of liability in a civil case than it is to get a finding of guilty, which is much higher in a criminal case, because the burden of proof in a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. A civil case is typically by a preponderance of the evidence, which is much lower. So the elements, the witnesses, the testimony that would establish a sufficient verdict in a civil case does not necessarily meet that same standards in a criminal case. So the prosecutors on a criminal case have to take the best evidence they can, the most reliable evidence they can, and provide that in the criminal case, because you're talking about liberty now, which is a lot more serious than just money, right? We're trying to take away somebody's life for liberty in a criminal case. Here, liberty, right? So we have to make sure from a judicial standpoint that the evidence is more reliable, and because the burden of proof is harder to meet.
Interesting. Okay. That makes sense, and that clears that up for me. You know, I was thinking about this. Do you think in any way this could be like the OJ Simpson case, where the evidence is really stacked against him, and then the jury decides that, you know, he's not guilty?
You know, with the OJ Simpson case, first of all, I was a kid and I remember watching the OJ Simpson case, but I think the OJ Simpson case had much more racial overtones in it. And I don't think this has. I think most people, when you're watching the news or hearing about the case, find this entire conduct allegedly by Sean Combs despicable because of the sexual nature of it. I understand that with OJ, there was obviously domestic battery and there was terrible allegations against him. But here, there's also not only domestic battery, but there's this level of sexuality that we didn't get in some of those other cases, like the OJ Simpson case. So I feel the perversion here is universally offensive to everyone. Mm-hmm. And what was going on top of that with a domestic battery is universally offensive to everybody involved. So I don't think, if you're asking me if a finding of guilty is going to happen, I don't think people are going, or finding of not guilty, people are going to be up in arms. I do, again, it's very hard because I'm getting this secondhand, but based on what I see right now, I think the government, I should say, is doing pretty well establishing the elements of their case.
When the defense takes a stand, when they start, putting their argument out there, what do they really need to do to try to win this case, if there's any chance?
So they're already planting seeds or trying to, connect the dots here. But what they really need to say is, number one, he was acting by himself, right? This is not an enterprise. This is not a criminal organization. He's not a gangster. He's not a gangbanger. This is a guy who's a bad dude. But just because he's a bad dude and does drugs and commits domestic battery doesn't mean it's a criminal organization. So that's what they need to establish, number one, right? Number two is that all these things that happened with Cassie, as far as the sexual allegations are concerned, were consensual, all right? The domestic battery they could concede to, and they already have, but again, that's not a crime here. That's not a crime that's being charged here, I should say. So them admitting that he committed domestic battery is not really going to, other than making him look bad, it's not going to negate any of the charges against him, right? They already know that he's not charged with domestic battery. So what I think they need to establish is, number one, he acted by himself under the influence of drugs, because he has a bad temper, because he's a bad guy, and he's a domestic batterer, right? Number two is that anything that happened sexually was consensual with Cassie, was consensual with everybody else, and this was just a freaky lifestyle, a swinger's lifestyle, so to speak, that he was living with her. That is a little bit harder to buy, because the other charges regarding the sex trafficking and whatnot are, I think, going to be established pretty easily, and already have, based on the transactions that were reported with the prostitutes or with the escorts.
Got it. Okay. Do you think that the prosecution has done a good job in saying that this is a criminal organization and that this just wasn't just one man that was facilitating for this all to happen?
So the last couple of days, they're continuing to establish that. I know they had, and the name's escaping me, but they had his assistant testify.
Yes, George Kaplan.
Yes, Mr. Kaplan, who would say that, he's pretty close to him. He'd prepare the rooms. He'd clean up the rooms. He'd provide the rooms. He, at one time, I think twice, he made a drug deal for some of these parties and for Sean Combs personally. Part of this is starting to establish these branches of a bigger operation, right? Where it's not just Sean Combs. So if they continue to do this with other witnesses, it's going to definitely establish that the racketeering charge that he should be most worried about. Absolutely.
Smart. Now, in terms of George Kaplan, let's talk about that, because he also, and I'm trying to figure out the right language, right? So right before he testified, he filed for immunity, right?
Yes, he did. And then the immunity, so to speak. So he pleaded the fifth and said that he didn't want to testify, but there was basically an immunity waiver that said they're not going to use this testimony against him at any future point. So it allowed him to testify with immunity without the fear of getting in trouble, so to speak, because he did engage in conduct, if you think about it, that is, if he's part of this racketeering charge, that means he was doing something illegal. And if he was doing something illegal, then he could be charged as well. And he even admitted to doing 2 drug deals. I believe it was at least 2 drug deals, if I'm not mistaken.
And it's interesting because I've seen other reporters, because, right, we're getting this all secondhand. I have seen
Right.
other reporters say that the jury was not in the room when he was given this immunity clause, that they were not in the room, but when he walked in, he smiled at P. Diddy and then took the stand. But then as soon as he took the stand to testify in front of the jury, it was as if, he's not looking at P. Diddy. It's just interesting.
It's very interesting what goes on in a jury trial when the jury's not around. There's a lot of legality that we try to, some people say, why do we do this? Well, we try to keep the jury as unbiased as possible, and we don't want them to make a decision before all the evidence is in. And if they hear certain things, we're worried that's going to change their perspective before it's time to change their perspective, right? We want them to gather all the information without it being tainted in any way. And when you hear on the stand that, hey, I'm pleading the fifth and so on and so forth, we're worried that that testimony might be taken by the jury in a particular way that's not going to give anybody in the trial a fair shake.
Do you think that it's going to help or hurt Sean Diddy Combs if he takes the stand?
I think it will hurt him. I do not think he should testify. What is that saying? Your own client or your own witness is the worst witness from a defense perspective. So I think if he testifies, it's going to be a problem because there's just too much there for him to explain. And if he starts to explain things in a way that make him seem, first of all, that he's lying, or that he's just a jerk, and he's this, even more of a jerk than what's perceived on the videos and the other evidence, the jury's going to hate him. And at that point, if you hate somebody on the stand, they're just going to convict him of whatever's in front of them. They're less likely to evaluate the evidence as they should. Okay? So I don't think he should take the stand in this particular case if he were my client. And I've had similar types of cases, nothing obviously with somebody this famous, but similar allegation. I do not want them on the stand because you're going to have a trained prosecutor cross-examining him, right? And that prosecutor is going to be waiting for this day, and they prepared for a year for this day to get. If he takes that stand, they know exactly what to say, and they're going to dissect him up there, and he shouldn't expose himself to that.
Do you think that he will get life in prison?
It's too early to say. I think if he is found guilty of the racketeering charge, he'll get life in prison. I do think so. It's hard to say right now because it's so early. And again, we're getting everything secondhand. But the racketeering charge is up to life in prison. These allegations are pretty bad. There's guns, there's drugs, there's sex, there's prostitution, there's domestic violence. Again, although that's not a charge here. But this is just a dirty look for him, with no pun intended, right? It's a dirty, it's a dirty, scummy look for Sean Combs. So if he does get found guilty of the racketeering charge, I don't think the judge is going to give him just a couple years or a minimum on this, right? I think the judge is going to set a clear deterrent effect on this, that just because you are famous and you are rich, you cannot do this to people for such a long time, for such an extended amount of time. You can't do this to people at all, but he's been doing this to people for a long, long time.
I know. And I think that's what's so interesting. Why now? Why now? Why all these years later is there finally a trial?
That is a great question. I think that somebody finally had the courage and the wherewithal to catch him, so to speak, and not be intimidated by him after as much abuse as she endured. So there's a book, there's videos, there's other people who can corroborate and verify her testimony and her account of this. It honestly, she had the silver bullet here, is the truth. She had a close relationship with him. She knew intimate details about him and his lifestyle and this enterprise. There are videos, there are wire transfers, there's blackmail attempts. She has access to all this. She made friends within his circle. His own assistants felt bad for her and had conversations with her about why she's still there, why she's still dating him. And now that she's cleaned herself up, she's stable, she has a family, she does not want this to go on, right? Now the defense is going to say, well, what she really wants is money, right? What she really wants is money. But the flip side to that coin is she already got most of the money. She got $20 million from Sean Combs within 24 hours of the civil suit settling. She said on the stand that she's getting about another $10 million from the hotel at where that incident occurred in LA. So the question is, well, she already has all this money. Why does she want to do this? And the prosecutors are going to say because she doesn't want this man to continue to do this to other people. She wants justice to be served. That's what all these witnesses are saying. This has gone on for far too long. And it's gone on in the industry for far too long. You have Harvey Weinstein, you have R. Kelly and all the allegations regarding them. This is something that we feel is systemic, is what they're going to say, and it needs to stop here.
So well said. How do you think how this case goes, how it's going to then affect all the civil suits that are against him?
The civil suits will eventually settle, I think. I mean, here's the thing. It's, in civil suits, we're talking about money. He has a lot of money, okay? And I don't know the details of the civil suit nearly as well as what's going on in the criminal case. But just statistically, civil suits tend to settle a lot more than these criminal cases do. I don't know how much they're asking. I don't know what the negotiations are. I know nothing like that. But, at some point, he might have nothing to lose. If he gets this racketeering charge and he's in prison for the rest of his life, he's going to say, I'm going to fight these civil cases. What do I have to lose, right? But it's in probably his best interest to settle it because you'd hope for a smaller settlement. And if there's any chance of him ever seeing the light of day again, then at least he has some money when he gets out. But who knows? Again, the civil aspect of this, I don't know quite as well as the criminal.
Do you think it would be helpful for him if his kids take the stand?
Yes, I do. And here's why. As traumatic as it would be for the kids, which it's sad to say that, I think this humanizes any testimony they would give would humanize him, right? That he's a regular guy who has problems, but he's a good dad. Just like all of us, we're flawed, right? And there's good parts of us and there's bad parts of us. And you're going to hear the really good parts of Sean Combs through his children, right? And that he was a good father and he provided for them and he was there for them, so on and so forth. And they're going to say, yeah, he made mistakes and sometimes he had a bad temper, but all of us are flawed in some way is the theory there. So I do think it would be good if family and friends spoke about him, but they have to speak about something that's related to the case. They can't just go up there and say, hey, he's a great guy. They have to say, I didn't see him ever hit Cassie. I never saw him do drugs. I never saw him with a gun. I never saw him do this, that, or the other, because that's not character testimony, right? That's factual testimony. They can't just get up there and say he's the best thing since sliced bread, right? You can't do that in a criminal case. You can't say because he's always just so good to me, that means he's good to everybody else all the time. He couldn't have committed these offenses. That can't be the testimony. The judge won't allow that.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. I know that Ileana's texting me right now. We've got more than 600 people watching this live, which is crazy. We've got a lot of people that are also commenting right now. I just want to read through some of the comments. And if you guys have any questions, please write them in and I'd be happy to ask Matthew. And Matthew, I meant to ask you, but we were having these mic issues. I meant to ask you how to pronounce your last name.
Fukuri, Matthew Fukuri.
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 Okay.
Fukuri.
Matthew for Corey.
Yes.
Okay, this has been so helpful and honestly so insightful. You know this case inside and out. I know it's been such a struggle for both of us because we're all getting it secondhand when it comes to these testimonies. If you guys have any questions that are watching, make sure to write your comments and I will be happy to ask Matthew. I've got some people saying, let me just find some here. I've seen video of Jamie Foxx saying Diddy gave him an Advil for his headache, and then he woke up 22 hours later. I know there's a ton of conspiracies out there, a ton. And I think that's what makes so many people watching this because we all want to know what else is involved. Who else is involved? And I know that a lot of big names, big rappers have been said that they've maybe been involved in some of this. And I think that's why people are waiting to see what names drop and if they do drop. IGG Rocks is saying this. I don't know that they have a question for Matthew, but he's saying if his kids take the stand, oh, yes, could they be questioned about their exposure and possible harm they experienced at FOs?
Yes, if they take the stand, they could be questioned as to anything that's relevant to the case. So, I think what his kids, if they do take the stand, would testify to is that they didn't see him do anything wrong, again, when it comes to violence or sexuality or so on and so forth. The prosecutors also don't have to question those witnesses. I think today, if I'm not mistaken, Cassie's mother testified, and she was obviously the prosecution witness, and his defense attorneys got up and said, we have no questions for this witness. So it obviously depends on how much weight their testimony is going to give as far as the kids are concerned, but potentially any relevant question could be asked. But I don't think it's a good idea on the part of the prosecutors to sit there and cross-examine, his kids for a day or two straight about things that they probably don't know about. I don't think it's a good look for the prosecutors. It'll alienate the jury.
Interesting. Let's also talk about this Kid Cudi because so many people are watching right now, and I know he's taking the stand today. And of course, they're arguing that he was threatened, that he wanted to, I'm trying to think of the right language, but to set fire to his car. And then he found a Molotov cocktail in his car in 2012. You don't have to explain much about his particular testimony at hand. I'm going to look it up right now as we're talking. But can you explain why this testimony, is it good for the prosecution, why it's important, how it corroborates possibly with Cassie Ventura's story?
Yeah, absolutely. We touched on it earlier, but she said that Sean Combs was extremely controlling, extremely jealous, that he had a terrible temper. And when she started dating Kid Cudi, he threatened them and said, I'm going to I'm going to put your car on fire, set your car on fire, I should say. And eventually it was set on fire. So this is, I don't know if he filed a police report at the time. I doubt it. He probably didn't. But this goes again to the criminal enterprise because it wasn't Sean Combs who actually went in there and set the car on fire. He had associates or friends or whatever you want to say, part of the racketeering criminal organization, do this, right? Which is related to Cassie, which leads back to him. So this is all part of that racketeering charge that's the government's most serious charge against him.
Kid Cudi today is also saying that Sean Diddy Combs broke into his home, put his dog in the bathroom, I think is what I'm reading right now. Of course, these are helping the prosecution as well, right? These claims.
Of course, yes. It claims, again, for the racketeering and then just to dirty up Sean Combs, right? If he's, again, brazen enough to do some of the things that we've already seen, is it really that unlikely that, we don't believe Kid Cudi that he broke into his home or had his goons set his car on fire? Probably not. It's not that far of a stretch, right? So again, he's a prosecution witness. Now, the defense was also going to get a chance to question him, and I don't know if we're even there yet in the trial. I haven't read that yet. But they're going to probably ask him questions like, why didn't you call the police? What were you waiting for? Why didn't you report this to the FBI? Why didn't you report this?
He said he reported it to the police, but the police found the bottle in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to that because I don't know. But, there are many things that the defense could say as to why this wasn't brought forth sooner, right? Why is it coming up now? It's coming up now because Cassie came forward. She's their star witness, and all of this evidence goes again to verify her claims about the racketeering charge and just what Sean Combs was capable of within his criminal organization.
Crazy. I'm just going to look through the comments to see what other questions. Diddy follows through on threats of harm, but not promoting and developing careers. I do think that was really interesting because I know Cassie gave a testimony that said, I had practiced all these songs hundreds of times. I had I wanted to make more records, but I ended up only ever making one album. What would you say when it comes to him promising? I mean, also what's interesting to me is she not only dated him, but I believe also at the same time, she's technically an employee of his. Does that play a factor? Because she's one of his artists.
Right. That does play a factor as far as coercion and the ability to refuse advances of whatever type. So her argument is that, yeah, I was dating him and yeah, I loved him, but I also had an interest here. The interest was my career, and he controlled my career. He was my boss. He was my manager. He was the one that was producing my music. So I had all of these attachments to him. So at some point I felt I couldn't say no. I couldn't say no to the freakoffs. I couldn't say no to the drugs. I couldn't get away from the abuse, is what the theory is here, right? This guy was so powerful and had so much under his control that I couldn't say no to him. And I was afraid of him too. Look at all these other things that have happened. He physically abused me. Here's clear evidence of it. He abused me on this many occasions. Here's witnesses who are going to testify to that. He hurt people, right? He paid people off, her friends off. He threw up, I think it was a hanger or something at her friend. He paid her off. The thing with Kid Cudi, this is just the beginning of it. We've only been in trial for about a week, right? They're going to really exploit the fact that he was a violent, unstable man. And if somebody is doing that to everybody around him, imagine what he's doing to this girl, his girlfriend, right? This person that he has complete control over, where he pays for her finances. He gives her an allowance, so to speak. He pays for her apartment. He pays for her car. She's completely beholden to him. She has no say in anything that she does at that point in her life.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to realize she was in her early 20s, just started dating this extremely powerful person who, of course, was allegedly doing all these things behind the scenes that just seemed crazy to me. But to me, I think what is the most shocking and the most upsetting is we're just now seeing the charges filed against him. We're just now seeing the trial against him. When he even admitted, right? There were times he admitted to all the corruption that he was involved in.
Right. That's a great question. When this case first came out, I said to myself, what took so long? What took so long? I mean, I'm like, did nobody ever file a police report? Why didn't the police investigate this on a state level or local level? Why didn't the FBI investigate this? And I think that when somebody is this famous with this much money and this much power, I mean, he was given the keys to the city by the mayor, right? He was given
crazy. That is such a good point.
Yeah, he was given the keys of the city. So when you feel like somebody like this is up against you, you feel like you don't even have a fight. There's no point in fighting this guy. So I think there's a deterrence there. Like, why even file a police report? Why continue to try to pursue charges against this person? Nobody's going to believe me, number one. Number two is I'm intimidated by him because I know the real Sean Combs. And if this guy has the mayor, who's his best friend, and he has the keys to the city, he could do whatever he wants. No police, no FBI, nobody's going to help me or believe me, right? I'm just whoever I am. I'm just your average guy or average girl. And I'm going up against P. Diddy, as they say, right? He's no longer Sean Combs. He's no longer a regular man. He's P. Diddy. He's the entertainer. He's the music mogul, right? So I do see why something like this would take long, but it disappoints me that I have a feeling it wasn't investigated as seriously or as properly. And again, I'm completely speculating now, but I have a feeling it wasn't investigated as seriously as maybe it should have years ago. And he's been in a lot of scandals, whether it was him and Biggie Smalls and the Tupac, and obviously Tupac and Biggie Smalls died. And then he had the whole problem with Suge Knight, who's now in prison himself. This guy has been surrounded by scandal after scandal and dangerous, violent scandals throughout his entire life.
Well, I mean, that's my question. Do you think we're going to see more federal charges filed against him?
I do not think that. I think that if the feds were going after him, this is all they're going to do. I don't think, those other things are quite as, how do I put this? I don't think the other things are quite as bad as it sounds offensive, because violence is violence and that's terrible. But there's an element to this with the sexuality and the perversion that you really don't have in a lot of those other matters that we discussed.
Yolanda Hill is asking this: will the celebrity's testimony play a role in Puff being found guilty, like Will Smith? I don't know if he's testifying, Monique or Usher.
I don't know who's on off the top of my head. I don't know if they're testifying. Some of the people who are testifying have not been disclosed yet for witness safety. So we don't know the full list of who's going to testify. And I don't know what they're going to say. The only true celebrity who's testified so far, other than Cassie, obviously, is Kid Cudi. Kid Cudi is going to testify for the prosecution, and he's going to, again, give credibility to Cassie and what she said, and really show what Sean Combs is capable of. Again, he's going to connect those dots that they're trying to make between his violence, the threats, and the actual outcome of those threats, right? So I think it'd be very interesting if some of those other people testify, but I don't know if they're going to.
Do you think there's a possibility that because this is such a high profile case, that there's maybe a lot more victims out there that have these really high profile careers? And I know, like, even Justin Bieber says that, I believe that's what I read, that he wasn't a victim. But do you think that there's a possibility that there's more victims out there that don't want to come forward and testify because potentially it could hurt their careers?
I have a feeling there's a lot of victims. I don't know if they looked at themselves as victims at the time. I think society has changed. As society has changed, we've been more aware of certain things. And I think now, and you brought up Justin Bieber, and everybody's talking about Justin Bieber, right? Because there are clips on social media of like awkward interactions, and he was interacting with Sean Combs at a very young age. And you got to wonder, right? We know he was at those parties, right? You got to wonder what was going on. Usher was at those parties very young, at a very young age, when he was coming into the industry. So I truly believe there are several other victims. At the time, they didn't consider themselves victims. Maybe now this is bringing it to light. However, I will say this: I don't think everybody wants to go and testify and bring a suit, whether civilly or criminally. I think there are people who want to put this past them. Cassie's best friend who testifies, she hasn't spoken to Cassie since the whole coat hanger incident. She said, I wanted to get these people and their problems out of my life. She said, I haven't spoken to them in years. I want nothing to do with Sean Combs. I want nothing to do with Cassie anymore. We were the best friends, but these people and their problems are nothing I want to associate myself with anymore. And I found that to resonate with me, because when there's people you don't want to be around, or things that you don't want to be around, you just want to get away from it, right? You don't want to sit there and prolong it or revive memories of it. So I do think there are people out there. I don't know how many will continue to come forward, if that's what your question is. I have a feeling if he goes down on this, that's going to be it. There's really not going to be. It's kind of like the R. Kelly case. Charges were filed all throughout the nation, federal and state court here in Chicago. And eventually they said, enough is enough. He's going away. He's in prison for forever. We're going to drop some of these criminal charges.
Another question that I had, can you explain this to me? Because I actually don't know how this works. These celebrities, that if they're subpoenaed, that they need to be, give witness testimony. How does that work? Can they say no? How does it work?
That's a great question. I get this from witnesses all the time, right? In my criminal cases. So if you're subpoenaed to come to court, it's a court order. You have to come to court. You cannot disregard a subpoena. If you do, you could be locked up and be held in contempt, is what the term is, right? However, although they're making you come to court, they cannot make you say what they want you to say, right? You could say whatever it is you want to say. So whether a defense attorney like myself subpoenas you, or when I was a prosecutor, if I subpoenaed a witness, it doesn't matter what I would want you to say, what either side wants you to say. You could say whatever you want to say, right? Now, typically you kind of know, whether you're a prosecutor or your defense attorney, what witnesses will say what, right? I know that if I subpoena this police officer, he's going to testify for me, and he's going to testify in line with his police report, just to keep it simple, right? These other people, celebrities, or whoever else, they can't say no to the subpoena, but when they get to the stand and get there that day in front of that jury, they could say whatever it is they want, or they don't have to say anything at all.
Crazy. Okay, only a couple more questions because I know it's been a long time.
All right.
Can we talk about how much does attorney work? People have been talking about his money, right? Worth $1 billion. Then people have saying that now it sounds like it's $200 to $300 million. But of course, he's got these civil suits. I believe there's dozens of them from I last read. And then, of course, he's got to pay for these attorneys. How much
Right.
does this all cost?
Well, attorneys are money hungry sharks. I'll tell you that much. They are not doing this for nickels and dimes. His attorneys, and I hear he has a lot of them, are probably making millions off of this. Now, an exact figure, I don't know. But to their credit, they're going to be on trial for almost 2 months. That's 2 months of their time, 8, 9, 10, probably more, 11, 12 hours of the day. And that's in addition to preparing for this trial. They've spent the last year preparing for this trial that's going to last 6 weeks to 2 months, they said. So they're getting paid very well, but they're also doing very, very important and hard work on his behalf.
When you're representing somebody, right, not like Sean Diddy Combs, this is just such a rare case, but when you're representing somebody like this, are you talking to them every day in and day out, like before the trial, how does that work?
Now, personally, my firm, we have a policy. We update clients on their cases every day. We let them know what's going on regularly. This is a very unique charge and a unique client and a unique case. So in a situation like this, you're going to have, or in general, you're going to have more client communication and interaction the closer it gets to the trial. The closer it gets to resolving this case, of course, you're going to have more interaction with the client. You need to talk to him. You need to clear up things that you're learning as the case is going on. Because as a lawyer, we get the pieces of the puzzle, right? And we're putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And then we're trying to come up on the defense side with a defense before the trial. So we're going to need a lot of interaction and a lot of communication with our clients, especially again before a trial.
Oh my God, this has been such a great interview today. I can't thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
My
This
pleasure.
has been so helpful. I can't wait to do it again. And guys, his name is Matthew Fakori. You practice out of Chicago, correct?
Yes.
Out of the state of Illinois.
Yes, Chicago, Illinois. That's where we are. That's the heart of our business, heart of our firm.
Thank you so much for coming on today. And guys, thank you for watching. I will see you next week, Thursday at 12 Central, 1 Eastern, Courting the Truth. Bye, guys. Have a great day. Bye, Matthew. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.